So, creating characters is one of my favorite things to do. Even if I don't use them for anything, it's a hobby. Making videos about them is just a good outlet for me to get them out there and share them. And of course, since I have so many videos of characters, I have been asked more than once about my creation process. While I have discussed it in a few videos, I thought it best to give a full tutorial video, as it were. To start off, the first lesson is to take everything with a grain of salt. I will be giving tips, insights, and suggestions throughout this entire video that are all part of my personal process. Not everything I do may work for you. Everyone has their own creative process, though it will always be helpful to get a secondary perspective, thus the merit in this video. Also, off top, none of what I'm talking about is something that I learned in creative writing classes, so I won't know exact terminology or cross-references, if that is what you're looking for. So, with that out of the way, in this video I will be covering both fully original characters along with original characters for already existing media. They will overall be rather similar in concept, but the approaches are the key difference. And as I am not an artist and can only give my thoughts on character concepts, I have enlisted the help of YellowNicky for not only the art of the completely original character in this video, but also to offer some words on the fundamentals of the drawing process of said character. Now, to start with the one most people who watch my channel are more interested in, let's talk about original characters for pre-existing media. Our primary example here will be my first Ruby OC, Ylva Fenris, who was also drawn by YellowNicky. Ylva is one of my oldest OCs, and I feel that Ruby intrinsically has a lot of good building blocks for creating characters. Though if you don't like the series, I totally understand, and that actually leads into the first step that I take in creating an OC: investment. It should go without saying that you can't expect to make a good character for a property that you have no investment in. So I do recommend avoiding making a character for something just because it's popular. You yourself have to enjoy it, otherwise your lack of interest will show through your OC, a problem that I almost had with my Jujutsu Sorcerer. Next, and the most important step in my opinion, figure out what it is you would like to see in the story. Picture it as an AU, or alternate universe, or even a spin-off unrelated to the plot. What is something you want added to the world? Is it a kind of special power? Is it a personality type to bounce off of the main group? Or is it just a specific type of person to match your interests? Really, there's no wrong answer. It's a spark of inspiration that will form into the character. For Ylva, she was born from wanting a character based on Fenrir from Norse mythology to be in Ruby. It was at a time when I was into that kind of thing through Mythical Detective Loki Ragnarok. Don't ask, we don't have the time. Anyway, I had the inspiration. Then it was time to actually mold the character around it for the next step. But here's the thing. In a way, the character already exists within this idea, even if you don't have the concrete layout for them. The best approach, I find, is to build off the initial idea by asking questions, continuing to use Ylva as an example. What kind of semblance would this person have? Should they be a wolf faunus? What is their character color? What's a good name to fit them? Things along that line, and they will start forming into something more tangible. This can be something put together in a flash, or something you mull over. Every character will be different. I recommend doing research into the topics that are the inspiration for your character, like I did with Ylva. Though sometimes, if you have a solid source of inspiration, like a song or characters from a different show, it can all be put together before you even know it. That said, even when you have a character all together, that doesn't mean they're static. Over time, as you grow and learn, a character can and will change. When I first thought of her, Ylva was named Ulfr and was a short firecracker of a gremlin. Now, she is a massive buff mommy of a woman, though a lot of her still remain the same, like pretty much all of her other physical details, which is another important thing you have to get down. The physical details of a character will generally be a mixture of the previous two steps, as ultimately they are what you personally want to see in a character, fitting your tastes, and what you feel fall in line with the main inspiration for the character. Details always tell you something. You will find meaning in them even if the creator doesn't intend it. And there are some details that you as a creator don't intrinsically have to assign meaning to. Example being the paint splatter pattern on Ylva's shirt. I just thought it was cool. Names can generally go either way. I'd say a lot of the times, you give names with great meaning and depth. But other times, you name a character Monica because it feels right, which is completely valid. That said, I cannot stress enough that there are details that need to have meaning and intention as core building blocks of the character. In fact, most of the details of the character should have intention. From something simple as Ylva's hair being thick to match the fur of a wolf, to her prosthetic limb and missing eye having significance to her backstory and powers, along with the inspiration for her very existence. Hell, her name means she-wolf, and it's super important for her to have a thematic name. Ylva being based on Fenrir led to her having the semblance berserk, giving her temporary strength in exchange for loss of reason and defense. This led to her having an incident that caused her to lose her arm and her eye, the eye being an extra bit because as I researched berserkers, I found about the Ulfhednar, which are the same but wolf-themed and known as Odin's special warriors. So, on top of being a wolf faunus with a berserker ability, the missing eye alludes to Odin's eye, which he sacrificed for knowledge. Ylva lost something that day, and in turn gained a teacher who would impart knowledge onto her. And trust me, things like that can be totally accidental. Ylva had an eye patch because I thought it was cool, but you should always take the opportunity to add depth to your character when it presents itself so perfectly. That said, while having a shallow character is obviously no fun, don't break your back overthinking how deep your character needs to be. Ultimately, it comes down to what you are happy with. And like I said before, your characters are likely to change over time. They are alive in that way, and sometimes you have to let them take the wheel and show you who they are. One last thing for this segment is something I personally like to live by when making an OC. Make them fit in the setting. The way I see it, what is genuinely the point of putting a character into an existing property if you're going to break the rules of said property? Like having a second avatar exist alongside Aang but be totally better, and having a quirk that lets you become a literal divine angel. Well, they're choices, to be sure. Like, I don't want to be mean. If you have fun going full on wish fulfillment to get that dopamine rush that you lack, go for it. Just expect harsh criticism for making less than creative decisions. Now, that is not to say don't make overpowered characters, because there are times and places for those. For example, my hero OC and my Jujutsu sorcerer can be overpowered, even in simple situations. But the key is that they are more than that. I work out ways that they can exist in their respective worlds, and, most importantly, gave them flaws. Not just in their powers, but their personalities. One has a weird love-hate relationship with her quirk, and the other just doesn't really care for fighting in general. There are so many ways to make a character dynamic, powerful, and still slot into an existing work. You have to see it like a puzzle, make it a game to have it fit and still be happy. And if the idea you have still doesn't fit, well, that's when you should think about making your own story. Now, this video is just about character creation. While this section does go into fully original characters, I will not be going into the nitty-gritty of full story creation and world building, though it will be touched on. Generally speaking, you may already have a character in mind if you are already planning out a story, but you always need more characters. Some will of course be filler, but you will need important characters as well. Side characters, secondary characters, antagonists, and so on. These people that will populate the story may not have the world revolve around them, but they need as much care put into them as your protagonist. That is not to say that every single named character needs to be a fully fleshed out person with a full novel attached. But you have to recognize that within the context of your story and world, they are for the most part people. They have lives outside of what you decide to write about, and that will affect how you want them to react to what you put them in. Just because you are not writing their story, and you may not even fully know it yourself, that doesn't mean they don't have one. Now, for the purposes of this video and exercise, let's say that we already have a protagonist. In this case, it will be Ylva and her friends in an original story rather than being strictly Ruby OCs. The story is Ruby inspired, but I think adding more high fantasy to it would be fun. There are elves, dwarves, fairies, dragons, but it's mixed in with cyberpunk, high-tech, high fantasy, old meets new. Not a perfectly original premise, but that's not what matters right now. Let's say there was a schism between the less magical people, dwarves and humans, and the very magical people, elves and fairies. Elves and fairies abandon the world, and stragglers are heavily discriminated against. Overall, there is little magic left to defend against the encroaching darkness, and that darkness needs a form. Now, pretty much most of what I suggested to make a character for a pre-existing IP can be used to create a purely original one. The main thing is figuring out what makes them tick and how they operate in this new world that you have created. Villains in much the same way. But in this example, I will be introducing a character, and I will tell you strictly little about them. This will be an exercise in introducing a character the way you would in a story, at least similar to that. When writing, you as the writer should know pretty much everything there is about the character, but you don't tell the reader every last detail about them immediately. Hell, there are characters, even majorly important characters, that you never reveal everything. When done intentionally and with purpose, that can leave an impression and allows the reader to think beyond your story and immerse themselves into the idea of the wider world that your single story contains. Though handled poorly, can lead to frustration and a general feeling of blue balls. It's a tightrope to walk. But enough with me building frustration, allow me to introduce to you the antagonist of the original story that I'm thinking up. The Lady of Blight. A being twisted by metal and flame in the form of an elf. She isn't a phantom or a spirit. She is corporeal, but is that her whole story? Tales have it that the darkness has taken many forms. Does this one represent the current times, or is she a poor soul that has lost her way? Righteous vengeance or pure malevolence? Regardless of the answer, she commands the forces of countless devils and monstrosities aimed at the lives of all, ushering in indiscriminate destruction. Is it a mystery to be solved, or just a force to be stopped? Is there time to figure it out? That would unfold in a story yet to be told, but maybe someday. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the irony about saying not to blue ball people and then just doing that, but this format I've chosen is not the best medium for it, though I would like to make a comic or something for this idea one day. For some relief, let's cover some tips and tricks for designing a character in more than just words. I am not well versed in this part, so the following are words from the lovely artist YellowNicky, who you should go support on social media and Patreon. She did not ask me to say that, but I'm telling you to do it anyway. Subscribe to me and become a member too, please. First of all, before starting any creation, it's important to analyze the briefing well. Understanding the main characteristics of the character and their personality are crucial to developing a good design. Once you've understood all of this, we start the creation process, which in this case was easier to approach using the silhouette. I wanted to convey a more intimidating and powerful image of the character. So I opted for a pose with a more bottom-up angle. With the silhouette already defined, it's easier to add the details later. The more pointed armor is an important point for the character design, because being a villain, it gives the impression that she is a more intimidating character, and that she is more rigid and difficult to approach. Finally, let's look at the colors. The armor has a darker metal instead of a lighter one, to give it a overall darker look. And it causes a contrast with the white of the hair, which is the most delicate part of the character. Long, platinum hair, which shows the beauty and purity of the elf that she once was. Her purple skin also contrasts with the other parts of her body that have been taken over by the fire fused to the armor. A big thank you to YellowNicky for her contributions to this video in art, wisdom, and video footage. It truly is such a pleasure to work with her, and it was a pleasure to make this video. I'm by no means a teacher, but I hope that I was able to help even just one person to guide them in making a character of their own. If there are any questions, I will try my very best to answer them in the comments, but please bear with me if I am unable to. I wish you all of the best with your creative endeavors, and will be back with more of my own. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Until then, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.